Awesome. Hey, Rob. Thanks so much for being here. It's great to see you.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Thank you. Rob is a good friend of mine. Rob, I wanted to bring you on today because I was just in Israel, and I've been to Israel now 3 times since the war broke out on October 7th, and there's been so many different phases of what this war has looked like. And given all of the misconceptions that I feel Israel and the Israeli people really just assuming things online about what this situation is looking right now. I want to be a voice and be able to articulate what's going on, but didn't feel like I have the appropriate tools to do so. So I wanted to bring someone like you on who's actually served in the IDF to share your story, your experience, and hopefully that'll resonate with some of the people listening. So with that, Rob, would love to hear about your background, who you are, and what led you to join the Israeli Defense Forces.
Cool. I born in New Jersey to an Iranian father, and I grew up in a very Zionistic household. Um, and the reason for that is so like my father, his parents, all of his siblings, and even three of my eldest cousins were all born in Iran. And then at the time, there was like I think in the 70s, there were still like close to 50,000 Jews living there. And then when the mullahs and the Khomeini took over, there was like a massive purge of Jews. And like, boom, overnight, like Jews were being targeted. My family all had to flee from Iran, and each and every one of them has like crazy escape stories of how they got out. My father himself, he had to forge a fake French passport because he went to a French Jewish day school when he was there so he could speak French, and he got away with it, and he was on one of the last unchecked flights for Jews at the time, and like he got out, and throughout all of their journeys they all made their way to Israel, which was like their safe haven. And so I grew up in a home that was very much like this country saved our family like millions of other Jewish families. And I not only believe that, I know that, and I kept that very true and dear to my heart. And so I always knew I wanted to serve in a military capacity. As I got older and thought about it more, and then the question really became was, do I want to serve in the United States military, where it's the country that I grew up in, the country that I love. I'm 1,000% an American patriot. But also, anti-Semitism is the leading hate crime in the country by like a astronomical margin, and we're 2% of the population, and like that wasn't acceptable to me. And so I thought, let me go serve in the IDF because one, that statistic that I just brought up, and then two, because I talked to a lot of my American friends and asked them, hey, when you were serving in the American military, whichever branches, did you guys serve with Israelis? And most of them, if not all of them, said no. And when I asked my family and my friends that were in Israel, hey, have you guys ever served with American troops? All of them were like, oh yeah, in some capacity, definitely, encountered American forces. And by me serving the IDF, this was like my chance that I could like, serve both of the countries that I hold so near and dear to my heart.
Awesome. Yeah, that's incredible. And how old were you when you ended up deciding to make that decision to serve?
I think I initially had the thought when I was like 18, 19. But I was playing soccer in college. I wanted to finish that up. And then once I graduated college, um, I pretty much sent my paperwork over and I enlisted like 8 months after I graduated, something like that.
Okay, okay. So you were like a little bit older for the standards of like,
Yeah, so I was 23, and like first for reference, like I had 15 other guys on my team, and I was by the biggest margin, I was older than the youngest guy by 6 years, and by the smallest margin, I was older than the guy that was right behind by like 3 years. So there was a pretty big age difference in me being like the grandpa of my unit.
got it. And what year did you end up serving from, like to and from?
2000, early 2017 to late 2020.
Okay. So you weren't there for like a large scale war, but obviously there's always things going on. So in what capacity, like, did you experience conflict? And like, can you share a little bit more about, maybe you can't share about your unit, but a little bit about what you did in the Army?
Yeah. So I mean, I was in a unit that was it's called Patsar 401 or Sayeret 401. It's the 401st Special Reconnaissance Unit. Our like tasking was pretty much to go ahead of artillery and the armored corps, um, perform reconnaissance missions, get an understanding of our enemies and um, their movements, what they look like, what their bases are made up of, and then make sure that any armored corps like tanks can safely come into an area, and then they can kind of set up shop, and then that's how we would move. That was our main designation. Um, Being that I was in during a time of peace, we kind of ran different type of operations. I was up in Lebanon. Our main tasking up there was to preserve the blue line, which is the area between Lebanon and Israel. And like the blue line is like this area that the UN doesn't control, but they're kind of like present there to make sure that there's no funny business. And so when we were there, Hezbollah, the terrorist organization up in Lebanon, they would often try and like push those limits. And then our tasking up there was to make sure that they wouldn't encroach on Israeli territory. Um, we also had operations in the West Bank, jumping out on known terrorists through intelligence. We'd be tasked on that. We had seizures of, you know, hundreds of firearms, thousands of rounds of ammunition, explosives, all this kind of stuff that were pretty much being headed from the West Bank to Jerusalem.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I would love to learn just a little bit more about like the training you went through because while I was in Israel the most recent visit, I actually heard from someone from the ICC, the International Criminal Court, who was a member of the IDF, talking about how obviously Israel's a recognized state, a recognized army versus these terrorist organizations that you guys are fighting, and of course you have to uphold yourselves to the laws of war. And in the media right now, of course, like there are a lot of accusations being made that Israel is committing a genocide, that we're breaking all these laws of war. And would just love to hear a little bit more about, you know, what your training looked like from like a morality perspective and what the real, in a short manner, if you could share just like some of the rules of war.
Yeah. So like my training was much longer and much farther extended than the average infantry. And so basically the first 3.5, 4-ish months was basic training. It's called Tirunut. Then we had advanced training, which is Imun Mitkadem. And then for SF units like mine, once you finish Imun Mitkadem, which is advanced training, you do something called Tirunut Yichida, which is like Hell Month, right? And that month is pretty much like, okay, like, you know, to even get to my unit, I had to go through selections, and we had about like between 400 and 500 soldiers go out for selections, and from that selection, they took 2 teams of 20. And then so like once you get through basic and advanced training, Hell Month is pretty much to say, okay, whoever finished basic and advanced, if you get through this month, more like likely than not, outside of outside influence like injury or something like that, this is going to be your team that is going to be active once you finish the training as a whole. And so like I think we went into Hell Month with 18, and then we finished training with 16. And so like once we finished Hell Month, we got into like our professional maslul, which is like, man, maslul is not a good translation, but it's kind of like ranger school, reconnaissance school, and like all the professional schools that like the commando units go through. And so that was another 8 months after that. So like 15 total months Was
That's
training.
all physical training that you're kind of referring to, but in terms of like training on just like the laws of engagement of like,
Yeah, sure.
yeah, that I'm just interested to hear that and your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I mean, I didn't like know how in depth it would be brought up, but pretty much like on day one of enlistment, you go to a place called the Bakum, and the Bakum is like where you get all of your like day one military gear, and so we get handed these things called the Ruh Tzal, and this is basically like the spirit of the army, spirit of the IDF, and it gives all these different types of like rules and standards about how a soldier in the IDF should be operating. And then the biggest one that's often stressed to us is this one right here. It says "Kavod Adam," and that basically means like respect of man, and it is stressed so deeply um, throughout all of our training. Um, there is a incredible injustice right now going on through media outlets about what an Israeli soldier is. And remember, like 50% of Israelis have to serve outside of like, physical and like mental deficiencies. I don't know if that was PC, but like if you're physically able, that's one. But then you have religious exemptions and all types of different exemptions. So about 50% of the country has to serve. Like not doesn't have to be combat, but has to serve. And we all get like this on day one. Every single one, every single Israeli soldier has to get firearms training, and especially in units like mine, especially infantry, especially all this stuff like when we are talking about firearms, when we're talking about weapon systems, when we're talking about all this stuff, the biggest thing is differentiating between a civilian and differentiating between like an enemy. And it's incredibly paramount for people to understand that. I mean, I can talk about the conflict and that if you want insight, it's up to you how deep you want to go into this.
Yeah, I think let's pause on that component for a
Okay.
second. But just kind of going off of that, right? Like I've been to Israel. I have friends in Israel. I have family in Israel. I know what it's like to be there. People making accusations right now on the morality of the IDF versus like what you're hearing firsthand from Israelis is vastly different. Um, if you talk to anyone that's served in the military, they're like, we are the most moral army in the world. But the media, everyone in the Western world sees that completely differently. So, what would you say to those people who would challenge you on the morality of the army?
Yeah, it's super interesting, right? Like, we missed each other in Israel this last trip by like a day and a half,
Yeah.
and I just went also, and this is the first time that I've been there in a couple of years, and so speaking to friends that I had that served in different units, I met up with the guys that were on my team. Some of them went back and did reserve duty. I spoke with my family, who they all served. I spoke with the taxi drivers, and some of them went back for reserve duty, and it was it was really interesting to get everyone's perspective because like it's really bad. I think that like you see me on the social media, and I'm a very big proponent. I try and push out content that's not like super biased towards one side, but definitely stuff tries to show the other light of Israel that we're not really getting in most large media streams. And um, I'm speaking to them. Sometimes I catch myself from America being like, "Oh man, maybe they are right in what they're saying, and it's so bad, and it's just because it's constantly being drilled at us." And I go over there, and I wanted to punch myself in the face because Israelis are, first of all, they want the war to be over so desperately. Like it's not even like a small percentage. It's like the vast majority of Israelis, almost every single person that I talk to, they're like, we want this to be over.
And just not to interrupt you, but like I felt the same thing when I was there. I was there for one of the largest protests since the outbreak of this war. over 500,000 Israelis showed up, which is the equivalent of like 17 million people in the United States. Like that's a large number for such a small country. And I posted about that because I was trying to bring awareness to like what's really going on here with the average Israeli. Like, what do they really think? And
Yeah.
I was met with a lot of criticism of like, you're wrong. Israelis don't care about Palestinian people. They just want their people home and the hostages home. And it has nothing to do with the Palestinians or any empathy. And I also think that's wrong. I don't think that that's true. I think there are so many innocent Palestinians in this situation, and Israeli people do have empathy towards them. But on the flip side, it's very hard. There's absolutely zero trust on both sides. After visiting the Nova site, going from a day of conversations with Palestinians who want peace, who are living in East Jerusalem and gather with Israelis every single day to fight for peace and have open dialogue, like going from that conversation and exposure, feeling so hopeful about our future, to then the next day going to the Nova site and seeing like how much I had forgotten about the extent of the atrocities that took place on that day. It makes you think like, it's hard to have empathy. Um, it's
Yeah,
hard.
it
I think
is.
people can have empathy and do, but I get it. It's hard. Um, yeah, sorry, I kind of derailed you there, but
No, you lead into a really good point, right? So, like, I think what a lot of people forget is, uh, just a few months prior to October 7th, Israel granted, I think it was like 50,000 working visas to Gazans to come into Israel and work. So to come into Israel every day, work, make money, and then go back into Gaza, and like that was like massive. That was like the empathetic side of Israel, and saying like we want peace. There hasn't been a major conflict since 2014. I think that, yeah, 2014. I think that was Tukhetan. Like that was the last big conflict. And even then, it was like, why did that conflict start? Well, that conflict started because Hamas kidnapped 3 Israeli students and then killed them. And it was like that one was like a war of, we're just going to go in and we're going to like punish Hamas. And whether we agree or disagree with why that conflict happened or how long it was pushed on for, and it was really a short conflict in the grand scheme of things, it happened. I mean, and this is totally different. I mean, we saw that these individuals that came into Israel, some of these workers, they were drawing out the schematics of the kibbutzim that Israelis were living on, that Hamas soldiers used to target families, households, one by one. And these aren't soldiers; these are families that were celebrating Simchat Torah, which is one of our biggest holidays. And it's like that was kind of like, that was just like scratching the surface. I mean, if you want to go super deep into it, Israel recently released the phone call, and it's a horrifying phone call of when he was captured. He doesn't even claim that he is affiliated with Hamas. He is just a Gazan who partook on the on the October 7th massacre, and he calls his father and he says, I just killed 10 Israelis. I have their blood on my hands, and I took her phone and I'm calling you right now. And he claims in his interview after being caught by Israeli soldiers that he's not part of Hamas. And like, if we're talking about the value of human life, like in the Ruach Tzad, Kavod Adam, like all that stuff, if we're talking about that, then we're talking about a man who was covered in Jewish Israeli blood, called his father, and then like when I talk about it, I get so angry that it's like, if I saw that, it would be like bang bang, he's dead. And then active Israeli soldiers, when they encountered him, they arrested him. And like, and that's what encaptures, and what people miss, right? Like it's kind of scary that it's being like, we've taken this dramatic, harsh left turn. And so
and you're
if
saying
we're like,
like they couldn't just shoot him in that instance because of
I mean, I don't know, right? Like, was he
yeah,
armed? Was he unarmed? Like, it's huge. And
yeah.
I don't know how he was captured, but like, you see a guy who's clearly not Israeli, covered in Israeli blood, probably mean, I don't know what he was wearing. Probably wearing civilian clothing, like all Hamasnikim do, and he was arrested rather than killed on site, right? And like that, like that's the big difference. And so, like, at the outbreak of everything, Reuters released an article polling Palestinians both in Gaza and the West Bank, and they polled and said, just on like a ground level, do you agree with October 7th? Like, just as simply as that. And 74%, the average between Gaza and the West Bank, 74% of Palestinians agreed with October 7th. And so if we like backtrack and we take a walk back to the question of, do Israelis have empathy towards the Palestinian civilians? Like, yeah, absolutely. It's like, without even a doubt, I would say that the majority of Israelis do feel some kind of empathy towards these Palestinian civilians that are caught in the crossfire, because any civilian casualty during a time of war is a tragedy. And I behoove you to find me a majority of Israelis that would disagree with me. It's just you can't find it. And so, to your point, when we're talking about, there is empathy, but there is such a level of mistrust, it 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 can't be explained. And so then the question becomes, how do we find a solution to what's going on? And there have been so many proposals of ceasefires that have been constantly broken. And at the end of the day, Israel wants two things. And I would be remiss to say if I didn't agree. And the first thing that we want our hostages back. And we know a lot of them are dead. I think we have 48 still in. Like, when I was over there, I think we're talking about receiving 2 more hostages. So I think we have like 48 or 49 hostages still in there, and I think we think about 20 of them are dead. And we're saying that we don't want just the 29 that are alive. We want the 20 bodies as well. Like, those belong to us, right? So that's one. And then two, at this point, because of October 7th, we've now realized that we absolutely need to finish Hamas. We have to. And this goes back to the empathy side, right? If we don't finish Hamas, which we know are hiding underneath Gaza, using civilian infrastructure to hide their remaining combatants, to hide the hostages, if we say, like, in a perfect world, if we said, we don't need the remaining hostages, we're good, we're just going to give Gaza back, then what happens?
Right. It still poses a major threat to Israeli society.
What happens is we go back to the same cycle. Okay, there will be a lull. I mean, there's never going to be peace, because, like, even though there's never outbreaks, I think what the world misses is that all the time, like, my family lives in Ashkelon and Ashdod, and all the time, like, I would say, like, a couple times a month, they're getting sirens for rockets, even during times of like peace. And so if we exit now, we give Hamas this time to rebuild, because what's going to happen? There's going to be a massive spike in international aid that's going to be going to Gaza, which, like, when all this is said and done, yeah, that's fine. Give them aid. But if we do this without Hamas being totally eliminated, Hamas is going to get these funds, and they're not going to be putting it back into civilian infrastructure. They're not going to be rebuilding the area. They're not going to be turning it into what we thought it would be in 2006. It is going to be turned into another military camp, a 40 by 25 military area that is going to be turned into another terrorist hotspot, that they are going to breed children like they have been, and they're going to start stockpiling on armaments to attack Israel again. And then it's going to be, well, Israel's never going to let this happen again. I mean, I seriously hope not. But now it's going to be even stricter borders. There are going to be no worker visas to come into Israel. There is going to be no empathy. It's going to be like, that's fine. You want to do that, you do that. But if you have Hamas in power, then we're never going to be able to move forward.
Yeah, well, it's this vicious cycle too of, like you were mentioning, we let, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians come into Israel for work. They're making more money in Israel than they were in Gaza. Now, since October 7th, like there's complete mistrust. Those people are no longer able to work in Israel. And instead, to make money, how do they make money? They join Hamas because
Yeah,
Hamas funding has all the money
yeah,
in Gaza. So it's this vicious cycle of, and listen, I get it. If there was no other way to feed my family, I mean, these people have no other option, right?
yeah. And I think so. I believe his name. I love his work. Aviv Retger. He works for the Free Press, and I mean, he's phenomenal. Um, he's Israeli. He's very in the middle and very intellectual, and I love listening to him and reading his work because he talks about the conflict right now in such a meaningful way that it's not just like one side or the other. It's like how do we come in the middle? And when it comes to like the hunger that's going on there, like no Israeli is going to say like there is no hunger over there. Like there is hunger, absolutely. I think where the line gets super blurry is like we've been hearing since month number 2 or 3 after October 7th, once Israel had started the engagement within the Gazan borders, like we've been hearing like famine is coming, it's now. And then I don't know if you remember, but in May there was this like awful news articles that were saying if Gazans don't get food now, like 24,000 are going to like die in 48 hours. That was a lie. And so we've been hearing for almost 2 years now, famine, mass deaths, so then the question becomes, okay, but if what you're saying is true, when, right? Like you've been telling us famine is evident and it's coming right now, but you've been saying it's coming right now for 2 years. And I'm not, and hunger is a long outstretched thing. It takes years. But what Haviv Retger says is that there have been like studies shown where like the cost of flour has been going up and down in the area, and it never truly reflects true like famine levels until just like a month ago. And so like now we can say, okay, like the food situation in Gaza it's in crisis.
Yeah.
It's a problem. The adversely, you have Israel that is actively giving massive like tens of thousands of tons of aid, medical, um, food, just basic standard of living items.
Is that Israel's responsibility at a time of war to give, like,
No,
is Russia giving Ukraine aid right now?
no, it's unprecedented. I mean, even before the war, Israel was providing an outrageous amount of electricity to Gaza, and if Gaza is its own entity and it's its own country, then why is the one country that in the Hamas charter it vows to destroy and kill all of the people that inhabit it? Why is that country providing electricity and water? Like
Right.
that doesn't make sense either. So like Israel is doing this thing during a time of war that is unprecedented. I mean, it's kind of like when they're like during Stalingrad, when like the Germans were trying to come in and like just like hold them out and make all the Russians suffer in World War II. It'd be like, but they were also giving them food and supplies so they can keep living during the siege. And like that doesn't make sense. If it's a war, it doesn't make sense. But here we are in a place where there's so much international condemnation that is unjustified and it's misunderstood completely. The conflict is wildly misunderstood.
But also, like, with
Uh,
this aid situation, like, of course, Israel is getting all of this aid and they have to also control it because what if there's a weapon? What if things are being smuggled in from other countries
yeah,
that,
sure. I mean
right? Like,
that's huge.
that's a big component of it as well, right?
I mean, absolutely. It's a time of war, and so I mean, it's also not like this is like Israel's aid going in. I mean, it is a lot of. I mean, if you look at most of those packages that are waiting, and that what do they call it? Like the aid graveyard? It's like most of it has Hebrew on it. It's coming from Israel,
Yeah.
but it's an international effort. Like this agency, and they're using people from all over the world to get the aid in. And so like the deal was Israel facilitates the aid entering the area, entering Gaza, and then from there the UN picks it up with the trucks and brings it in, and then the question becomes, well, why isn't the UN carrying out their end of the deal? Like, what are we missing? Why is Israel, who is currently in an active war with Hamas, why are why is Israel giving them aid and succumbing to this international pressure? And then the UN, which is supposed to be the other entity that's supposed to be facilitating that aid to get to the Palestinian people, where are they? Where's their responsibility? And I can go down that rabbit hole also.
Yeah, we don't need to right now because I have a lot of other questions for you, Rob. But
Yeah.
but no, I like appreciate that like anecdote because I think that's obviously a major topic right now in this time in particular. And yeah, it's Israel being held to a different standard at the end of the day than many other countries in time of war. But just pivoting, Rob, to civilian versus like Hamas casualties, like how difficult is it to distinguish a Hamas fighter terrorist from a civilian? And can you explain like why that is, especially with what we're seeing in the news constantly of Israel being, bombing hospitals, for example, and like if Israel is abiding by the laws of war, how is it so that they're able to go and bomb a hospital, for example?
Yeah, I mean, it's so I'll give an anecdote, right? My One of my guys on my team, he went to a reserve duty, and he decided rather than to serve with our unit, his younger brother was in. He went to go to be with his younger brother and serve with him. And he's saying they're driving in these armored Hummers that through Gaza, and the Hamasniks, they oftentimes they pop out of these like almost like pothole type things, and with the environment, the rubble, it's like oftentimes you can't even see them, and so Hamasnik pops out of like a pothole, fires an RPG. It thankfully misses the lead Humvee, and then the guy like drops the RPG. He sprints out into, they have like these cutouts inside of the buildings, and like it'll be like you'll have a cutout in one side and a cutout in another, and it'll connect through the buildings because they're using civilian infrastructure to get through the area. And so they see him, has the RPG, they are taking cover to not get hit. He runs away, and then he comes back out, and then just 100 meters down the road, there's like one of those like safety encampments where there's not supposed to be any military engagement, and Israel abides by it. And then this guy who comes out, changed his shirt. It's the same guy, and he just casually walks down the road, and they can't do anything. There's nothing that they can do, and like that's kind of the level of, one, how hard is it to distinguish an enemy combatant versus a civilian. Two, how Hamas uses like their wardrobe and what they wear to blend in with the civilian population. And then if we want to talk about the hospitals or the schools or anything like that, like we're seeing like, I think it was a week prior to me getting to Israel, you might have been there when a hospital was hit. And that in that instance, Israel said it's war. Mistakes happen during times of war, and we're going to thoroughly investigate it. And that's not like stum. They're not going to be like, oh, we're going to investigate it and then don't. They're going to investigate it, and then if there are soldiers that are responsible for critical errors, those soldiers will be held responsible, and like responsibility can be jail time. And that's how serious Israeli soldiers, with like Kavod Adam and like their responsibilities, their like how they operate, that's how serious the standard is in Israel. And so, but like we see, I think it was like 9 or 10 months into the conflict, you had was it Matkal or Shayetet or one of those like super like tier one operating units. They dressed up as Hamasnikim, which wasn't like hard because they're just in civilian clothes, and they pull out guns. They rescue multiple hostages from a hospital in Gaza. And so like how is that a thing? How is that like respectable? How is that? And the second that happens, that hospital is no longer considered a civilian establishment. It is now it's now a grounds of like a military entity, and so now it becomes open to what do they have in any of the rooms of that hospital? What do they have in the basement? Is there a tunnel underneath that? And then there was a tunnel underneath that hospital. And so when Israel struck down that hospital, it's not because we're trying to destroy like hospitals and medical establishments for Palestinians, because well, like we understand that, we see that this was 1000% an area that Hamas was operating out of. They used that hospital because they knew it was less likely for Israel to take it down, but then we did, and and like it's so, the conflict is so clouded and convoluted, and it's jam packed with all of these tiny nuances that to put these massive labels on it from either side of the political spectrum is an absolute injustice.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of massive labels, since day one of this war, before we even entered Gaza, people were claiming that Israel was committing genocide. That's still a major accusation today. Um, what would you say as someone who served? How would you respond, or how do you respond? Since October 7th, I'm sure you've had this conversation. How do you typically respond to people that say that?
I get pissed off, quite frankly. I think it's absolute bullshit. Can I curse?
Yeah, yeah, of
Oh
course.
yeah, it's bullshit. um no, it, my my answers are only going to get worse, but like it's absolutely heinous, absolutely heinous. Right. So the Gaza Health Ministry um, is run by Hamas. Right now, I think the number that they're throwing out there is about 60,000, which is a big number. I'm not downplaying that. And so Israel is saying between 20 to 25,000 are Hamas. They're terrorist combatants, and so that leaves about like 40 to 35,000 civilians caught in the crossfire. And again, tragedy. It's sad. Like any civilian that's caught in the crossfire, it's sad. Um, but that ratio is like phenomenal in urban warfare, especially in urban warfare to this extent. I know it's crude and it's harsh to say, but that's the reality of urban warfare, especially in one of the most densely populated regions in the entire world. And so if we look at like the American response in Afghanistan and Iraq, I think the numbers were horrifying. I think it was like 13 civilians to one combatant. And we're looking at like a 1.25 civilian to combatant ratio. And so like that's just on that end. And then I talk about this. There's one person on the complete opposite end of the aisle that I talk about. And it's an old professor I have from college. I'm still friends with him. I love the guy, and I talk with him, and I enjoy talking with him about it, even though he is so far on the opposite end of the aisle, because I love hearing his perspective about things from a super intellectual. See, like he's one of the smartest guys I know, and so he comes at this from the side of I love Israel. I truly want Israel to have a state. Um, and so I disagree with this because that's not a good look on Israel. And I say, okay, well, why is it not a good look? And he says, well, it looks like it's ethnic cleansing. It looks like you're trying to push Palestinians out and remove them from the lands. And I'm saying that's not the case. Like even right now with Netanyahu's policy of we're just going to go and take over, get rid of Hamas, and then we're going to hold it for Palestinians. Like the end goal is never to take back Gaza into Israeli custody. That would be a massive blunder. The vast majority of Israelis don't want that. And if we're talking about ethnic cleansing, I mean, we can look at the region and we can say, okay, well, first and foremost, I mean, my country, so Iran, in the 1940s, there were 100,000 Jews living there. In the 70s, then there were, because of discomfort, there are about 45,000. Now there's like 6,000 Jews living in Iran. Egypt, I think, had like 65,000 Jews living in Egypt pre 1950. Now there's less than 10. Syria was the same thing. There was like 45,000 Jews living in Syria. Now there's less than 10. Like Lebanon, all these countries. And so my question becomes, okay, one, what you're saying is we are ethnically cleansing or genociding Palestinians from Gaza. It's not happening. They're still there. In fact, since the onset on October 7th, the Palestinian population has increased, which is bananas. So if we're causing a genocide, but their population is increasing, one, and two, we're looking at a region where there are so many current active genocides happening. We look at the Uyghurs in China, and we're looking at the Sudanese. Yemen is there's a it's horrifying what's going on in there, and like the Houthis have a massive control of a massive region in Yemen, and there's genocide going on in there. The Syrians right now are straight up ethnically cleansing the Druze, and Israel is intervening right now. We are preventing the ethnic cleansing of the Druze. If you remember back in 2019, I think the Turks were ethnically cleansing the Kurds, and Israel intervened there. Like Israel is a country that constantly intervenes in genocide, in these people, like in like vast minorities being ethnically cleansed. So to say that we're doing this to another people is abhorrent.
Yeah. It's hard to see that in the news, especially when I'm seeing articles even written by Israelis that say, "Hey, we are committing genocide," and I'm admitting that now. Like very left wing newspapers like Haaretz,
Yeah.
they make those claims, and I think, you know, I would hope that that's not the case. I think there's a big differentiator between like what the Israeli government wants and how the IDF is practicing. What that is, like, I don't know. Maybe you can share more light on that as well. But to think that people don't look so closely at the numbers and make these claims because it's trendy or just because we're a Jewish state, um, is what seems very scary to me.
Yeah, I mean, we are the only Jewish state. This is our ancestral homeland. Like anything against that, Israel being the ancestral homeland of the Jews, any claims against that, it's bad history. It's misinformation. It's bad history, and it's poor learning. Um, so like right, like that's like line number one. And so if we're saying like a while ago, I think like two conversations ago with that professor, he said like, well, would you be okay with Israel not being a country that is for the like the Jewish state? And I said, and what would it be, right? Like, why do we need like a 53rd or a 54th like ethno-Muslim state? Why give me one valid reason why there has to be another 23rd Muslim state in the Middle East? Like, why can't we have one state for the smallest population of Abrahamic of Abrahamic monotheistic religions? Why can't we have one state in our ancestral homeland? Like this is it's the story of Jews going back to Israel is is pinnacle decolonization. Is us going back, reclaiming our land, and thriving in it. And yet you have so many countries that are coming out against us. Like Ireland is horrible right now. Spain is horrible right now. England and France are they're going down as well, and they're coming at us. And it's like this is like textbook decolonization. And this is where it's very challenging for me. But you were saying like we're hearing it from Israelis, like on the left, that this is a genocide, like this is happening. And I think something that a lot of people don't realize is that one, Israel's on like what their 12th election in the past 5 years. They've been at a stalemate for the past 5 years on who is going to be the next prime minister, and so like Bibi has been in office for all this time. And whether you like him or you don't like him, he's been in the sea, and Israelis on both ends. Like, I know very staunch right wing Israelis who absolutely hate him and they want him as far out as possible. And it comes down to the fact of, if I can't support any prime minister that was in charge on October 7th, it doesn't matter left or right. I just don't want him there because he was in the seat.
Yeah.
And you go to the other side of the aisle and they want him out so badly because he's been in for so long. And they have a point also. But you're seeing these new articles that are coming out more as like hit pieces that are just trying to get him out for whatever reason they possibly can. There even the protests that you witnessed when you were there, the 500,000, a lot of those Israelis were left wing. And I mean, this isn't a good depiction because it's such a minute sample. But it's a guy who's going through and he's just posing the same question to a lot of these left-wing Israelis, and they're saying, all the hostages come home today, the war is over, but Bibi Netanyahu stays in office. What do you say? And they said no. And so, like, that's also a thing. Like, it's also political. There's also massive implications to the political climate over in Israel. It's not just so cut and dry. We're talking like the question posed was, the hostages come home, the war ends, but the current prime minister stays in office. What do you say? And they say, no, I don't want that. And so, like, there are massive implications there, and people don't understand this.
Well, it's beyond complex to no belief. And I'm still wrapping my head around things and trying to learn as best as I can and speak to people like you and speak to people in Israel who are living this reality. And I think that's what's the most frustrating, being in America, being in the Western world, and seeing people that have never even been to the Middle East making claims like this. But of course, when you hear claims like this from people living there, that's when you begin to question your own sanity. I guess like going on that note too, since you were talking about Israel being a state and having a Jewish state and how it is our ancestral homeland, this term Zionism has become weaponized, has become misunderstood. And I want to be clear that I'm a Zionist as well. And my definition of Zionism is not the eradication of the Palestinian people. And I don't think that's the definition of Zionism for many people. My definition of Zionism is just the right to our ancestral homeland, and point blank. That's it. What, I guess, Rob, would you say to people that are anti Zionist or confused on what this term has become?
Yeah, right. So if you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Jew. And like, it's a hard line for me. 95% ish of global Jews are Zionists. And so if
There
you're
are a lot of
saying,
there are a lot of Jews now that, especially in places like New York City, that are anti-Zionist Jews. So how can we,
sure, but
you know?
they're tokenized, right? It's they're super tokenized. Like, you can, like, people that come against me send me Bernie Sanders all the time and Seth Rogen, which is like two polar, like, opposite ends of who
Yeah.
I want to be reading, right? But like, these are individuals who are like tokenized Jews. It's kind of like when the Republican Party like a few years ago was saying, like, look at Candace Owens, she's black and she doesn't abide by like BLM, and it's like, okay, well, one, we're listening to Candace Owens, that's a horrifying thought, and then two, it's like, okay, well, but the Republican Party is just tokenizing her. They're saying, look, here's a black female that doesn't abide by like the current modern day liberalism, and it's, why is it okay for the Republican Party to do that with Candace Owens, but it's not okay for, but it's totally fine for the left to do it with the vast minority of Jews who are anti-Zionist. And so, if, like, for me, Zionism is this like self-determination in our ancestral homeland, period. And I think that's a really easy thing to back. And for whatever reason, right now, the world is totally against that.
Yeah. And self-determination for everyone. Like the Palestinians have a right, to their own self-determination, as do Jews and Israelis in the state of Israel. I think like what you can argue is that perhaps the Israeli government hasn't made the best decisions throughout this war. As we've seen in Israel, people are upset that this war is still prolonging for perhaps political gain on Bibi's side. And to, I think this argument around like Zionism is people are saying, well, just because it doesn't mean I'm anti-Jewish, or doesn't mean I hate the Jews. I can hate the Israeli government. That's fine. You can criticize the Israeli government, but to go as far to say that that means you're an anti-Zionist, that's where I have a problem, because then you're just delegitimizing the state of Israel as our homeland.
Right. You can criticize any government, but I was having
Like, we are Americans, and people criticize Trump every single day, but
right.
people can't seem to differentiate Israelis from Netanyahu, and that's where I have a problem. These people aren't representative of the single person.
Right. I mean, so there's 2 points I'll make to that. I was just literally just with my team a few days ago, and we're having this conversation of like a lot of them had to wait, or they did reserve duty, and then after they were like, holy shit, I need a break. So they did like another post service trip, as most IDF veterans do, and they're like, some of the guys are doing trips in Europe. Some of them are doing trips in the Far East, all this stuff. And they said, like, when they're going around to these countries and say, hey, where are you from? They really need to get a good gauge on the person before they say, I'm Israeli. And that's a really scary thing. I mean, it's happened to me here in America. It happens to me quite often where someone's like, oh, like, where are you from? And I'm like, I'm Iranian. And they're like, oh, that's so cool. And it's like, that's so crazy to me that I can say I'm Iranian, which is the #1 sponsor of global terrorism right now in the world. And people be like, oh my God, that's so cool. And if I said, oh, I'm Israeli, they'd be like, or they'd say shit to me. Like when within 24 hours of October 7th happening, I got like over a dozen DMs in my Instagram calling me a baby killer just because I served in the IDF. And like that was horrifying. And then like the other side to that is, I mean, you said it before, like military actions that Israel has taken that are controversial in any light, or the government itself. Like people say, like, don't you believe that Israel is a reflection of like Jewish people and the perception of Jewish people internationally? And it's like, okay, well, if we're saying that, then if you're saying you're anti-Zionist, you're still saying you're anti-Jewish. If you're going to go as far, if you're on the other side of the aisle, and you're going to go and say actions taken by Israel or the Israeli government or the IDF are going to reflect how people treat Jews in the global community,
But you
then
say
you're
you're anti-Zionist. It doesn't make sense. Right,
but
right.
do we see it like, so if you're an anti-Zionist, you're anti-Jewish, right? And like it's really not that hard of a line to follow. And so the answer is like, okay, we want this war to end. How does it end? Like, do the Palestinian people rise up, get rid of Hamas? I don't know, because a lot of Palestinian civilians were holding Israelis hostage in the past 2 years.
Their homes, and now
So
they're also relying on Hamas for their literal survival, to
right,
feed
their
them.
food and all that. So that's one. So that's unlikely. Um, and even if we get all the hostages back today, then like we still need to smother Hamas before we can let the Palestinian people rebuild. And that becomes something that's for that to happen, the war is going to have to escalate.
How do you fight a war where there are, like, I don't think people in our side of the world fully understand the depths of the tunnels and the like lengths Hamas has gone to like build this entire city underneath the city of Gaza, and like how difficult that is to fight a war in this infrastructure deep beneath the ground. Like, if we have hostages there, it's not that easy to just kill all the terrorists because Israel values life. We want our hostages home, whether dead or alive. And I know that that's like a big debate even in Israel as well. Like super right wing people often are like, screw the hostages. Like, let's just get rid of Hamas. Most people, I think, in Israel want the hostages home, like regardless.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it's like I just don't think people even understand the complexity. Like we're not fighting a battle on a battlefield here. This is like in not even civilian infrastructure, but it's underground. And like I don't think can the IDF even work underground? Like I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't even understand how a war is fought that way.
So I mean, in my unit, we had to go through very, very, very basic, um, like tunnel warfare and how to operate and fight. Very basic level, and that was just if we were ever in a situation where we no choice, we had to go into a tunnel for whatever reason. I never went to a tunnel, but when we're being trained, first and foremost, a lot of these tunnels are like I'm a pretty broad guy. um these tunnels are like my shoulders are like here and like my rifle is like here, and this is how I'm walking in a single file line behind a dude with a shield at the front, and we're pushing through and we're pushing it through like tactically fast, but it's not a sprint. And even if we were sprinting, you lived in New York.
Yeah.
New Yorkers that might be listening to this podcast, the tunnels underneath Gaza are as vast as the New York City subway system.
Yeah.
And so, like, think about how crazy that is, and then think about, okay, well, the subway tunnels are actually pretty wide because they have to fit trains. These are tunnels that are like this, so think about how much more they can squeeze in and like maneuver and go this way and that way and the other way. And so, like, the ways that we go into one, preserve the lives of our soldiers, which is a whole nother topic of conversation. Like, if we really wanted to like just slaughter Palestinians and genocide them and ethnically cleanse them, then we wouldn't be sending our own soldiers in there. We would just be completely dominating through the air. But the way we conquer tunnels is one, we've been using okets a lot, and we're sending dogs in, and dogs are going in, clearing. The dogs have cameras on their vests that we see, okay, clear. And then once we know that's clear, okay, now we're going to destroy that tunnel. And so that tunnel, like we have combat engineers that destroy those tunnels. There's also an incredible unit, Yalom. And Yalom, these guys will actually go down. If we see that, hey, there is a possibility of a hostage being Yalom, they will go down. They're incredible operatives going into tunnels, and they will go and do tunnel warfare like that. And so, like, that's their tasking. And so it's like, if it's as vast, if we are fighting in these tunnels that is as vast as they are, it's not going to be like chick chuck. It's not going to be like 1-2 seconds. It's going to take a long time to get all the way to clear that infrastructure.
No, that's extremely complex, and that's what I think people don't understand, or care to do like the research on. So like appreciate you kind of shedding light there. And I think like the bottom line is, with this entire situation, we're 0.2% of the world's population. Like we're never going to win this PR battle,
No.
which is unfortunate. When 25% of the world's population is Muslim, is Arab. Um, Not to say they're the only ones speaking negatively about us, but if we're comparing the Middle East and all the Arab countries that surround Israel, like that's a large percentage compared to the percentage of Israelis and Jews in the world. So we can continue to have these conversations, be vocal about it, but yeah, it's never going to be something that we're unfortunately winning. But how can we take like little steps to at least make people understand what it's like people that haven't been to Israel? Because I think like even when I was just there, like there was such a it's just and you understand, Rob, like the feeling of being in Israel is just like it's indescribable. Like it's our homeland, it's our purpose, it's everything like in our blood, it's who we are. And the people there are just so happy in a place of such darkness. The Israeli people are like one of the happiest populations of people in the entire world because of our community, because of how strong the Jewish community is, because of everything we've been through, which is such a beautiful thing. But it's like crazy, this like contrast of life and death and darkness and happiness that exists there. And I think it's, again, like I urge people listening to this, like if you haven't been there, to go, like get the
Oh,
chance to go
yeah.
and like experience it, because to make these claims and accusations without having been there, it just feels, it feels wrong to me. It's wrong.
Yeah. I mean, when I landed last time, I jumped in a cab. And I was sprinting to my friends and jumped in. First 5 minutes of the conversation, I asked the cab driver, I'm like, "So how has it been here in the past couple of years?" And he goes, "Anachnu sovlim tov," which is like, we suffer well. Like we're fine. Like we Israelis are professionals at suffering, and we do it well. The Jewish people are really good at suffering. We've been doing it for our entire existence, and um, like, to your point, what are these small steps that we can do to make the world better, safer for Jews? First and foremost, it's like you said, we're 0.2% of the global population. We don't have a voice, and that's one of the biggest issues with the conflict that's going on. And so the first small step that we can take is like say, hey, non-Jewish people, when you see something, hear something, or at the very least, just stand with your Jewish friends and say, anti-Semitism is bad, and I'm going to call it out when I see it. And that includes saying, I don't like Zionists. Because, again, if you don't like Zionists, you don't like most Jews. And if you say, well, that Jew is an anti Zionist, then you're basically saying, that Jew is a good Jew because that Jew agrees with me. And that's the conversation we should be having. That's the conversation we need to be having. Um, and outside of that, like, I refuse to. I refuse to go from like anything out. Like that's the smallest step that we can take as a community of peoples.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. Well, Rob, thank you so much for like sharing a little bit about like your story, your history, and yeah, it was really insightful to learn from you. And you said it better than I could have. So this is exactly why I wanted to chat with you and just like understand from someone that's been on the ground. So really appreciate it. If you have any last words that you want to share too, please do.
Am Yisrael Chai.
Okay, love it.